So we have different perspectives.
And age.
Australia still operated under White Australia policy. I had an Irish passport, so therefore I had all the rights of Australians. I voted. I could do whatever I liked. British and Irish passport holders were welcomed as warm Australians. There was no processing. That all changed in 1975. I think Baz had a different experience, as have a lot of people since then. I first met Baz at an international student conference at Scotch College, where Scotch College had organized 6 network schools from Africa, India, China, can't remember where else, Baz.
India,
that they have a relationship with, and every year they bring these students together, or the next cohort, to look at global issues and to allow them to understand how they can be global citizens. And Baz talked to them about the less advantaged people in the world, and particularly his experience in the Middle East. Baz is the product of a Jordanian father.
Lebanese.
Oh, sorry, Lebanese. But he lived in Jordan. And a...
I'll get it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Otherwise you'll not be able to see, I think.
Well, that's true.
I know.
That's true. And a mother who comes from an area of the Middle East I've never heard of before. So you might like to explain that to us.
Explain that.
He's worked with USAID. He has managed refugee processing. He has seen the dislocation of peoples and their desperation. And of course, our government has indicated that it will accept 12,500 Syrians. But with your experience, Baz, I think Angela Merkel should be recruiting you to help her assimilate 1 million refugees that were unprocessed in a way. At least the intake I came to in Australia under the Second World War, Australia brought in 2 million migrants under a very well-managed scheme. I don't think Germany has had the same attendance to detail. So I present to you Baz, and we'll hear his story and get some insights what it's like to be a new migrant in Australia who is not Anglo-Celtic. So Baz, over to you.
Thank you. Hello and thank you. I don't know if you can hear me. So the title of my presentation, Stranger in Paradise, was inspired by the song that we heard at the Christmas luncheon. And when the person, I can't remember their name, stood up and started singing Stranger in Paradise, I was like, I am the stranger in paradise. So to give you a little bit background about myself, I am Jordanian, and this is Jordan. The reason that I like to use this map is not just to promote Jordan as a historical or a touristic place, but also, well, it's not very clear on the map, but to show that as a Middle Eastern country, I figured out that a lot of people, you can't hear me. Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rich. A lot of people are surprised that in the Middle East, we have a country that has this cohesive living between Christians and Muslims. And a lot of people are surprised how in Jordan you can't find this segregation. So, back to my introduction. I am a Jordanian born and raised. My father is Lebanese and my mother is Circassian. Circassian is the old kingdom in Russia. So the ones that are highlighted in red are the old kingdom. And they were forced to leave in the 1864 and they migrated to the Middle East, mainly and Turkey. Now, Jordan became a very good expert in refugees simply because since 1948, all of these people from these different countries came to Jordan. Jordan has 16 different nationalities living in it. As we stand, like a couple of months ago, we had a when you count the people, I don't know what's the name in English, of course, census, we had 3.2 million people living in Jordan as immigrants. Jordan is not rich in resources. We have a debt of $1.3 or $1.5 billion. The reason that people come to Jordan is we are originally Bedouins. Now, the Bedouins has their own tradition as any other country, the original custodians of the earth. But mainly with the Jordanian Bedouins is they are hospitable a lot. So the very well-known thing that if you are in the desert and you rock up at the Bedouin tent, they will host you for 3 days without asking your name, where do you come from, where do you go to, why are you here, and all of that. And they are obliged by their tradition and by the ethics to give you shelter, to give you food, to give you beverage, and all of that. Now, after 3 days, if you choose to disclose any information, it's up to you. If you choose to go somewhere from their tent to somewhere else, they will make sure that you are properly equipped to that, whether they'll give you a horse, they'll escort you to that place, or whatever. So currently, when you visit a Bedouin tent, which is in the desert, of course, Wadi Rum, this is what you will have. Once you get in, they'll serve you the tea. And I must say I'm not a tea drinker because I'm not a British. I am a coffee drinker, but I can swear that the tea that they serve is totally different. And I asked why. Simply because they make it on the coal, and they add some herbs that is desert herbs, so it gives it a better taste. And I thought it's just for the taste. Apparently that there's a science behind it. The herbs makes your blood circulation a little bit slower, which means you will get a little bit cooler. You will not feel hot as much. After 8 years of working in international development in Jordan, in Middle East, and my last deployment was in Syria as a logistics manager. So for 6 months, I had to worry about 18,000 to 20,000 people. If they are properly fed, if they are properly water, sanitation, and all of that. Of course, not worrying about the war that's going. And I don't know if any of you would remember, there was a chemical attack in Syria. I was extremely fortunate to be there. So I had 6 mobile hospitals that I have to get in. All of these bad boys that you hear about, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, I had 100% interaction with them, face-to-face, and all of that. Back to Frank's point. When I arrived to Australia, on the border control was the first thing that you see of Australia. Of course, lucky I knew about Australia before, and I knew what to expect from border control. So he looked at my passport, and it was Jordanian. He flipped it from the other side and started going through my passport. And then he saw the stamps that was Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, and he was like, we caught the big guy. And I'll come back to the big guy because it might be very interesting for some of you. But I swear that I got the clearance from AFP and all of that, so I am nice. I'm Rotarian, of course I'm nice. So he called his superior officer, and they came and they were chatting. And once he got to my American visa, I have a 5 years multiple entries American visa. He had a smile on his face and he said, welcome to Australia. And I was like, why didn't you save my time? But anyways, when I applied for my permanent residency, it was 182 pages application. And when I had my interview, the first page that they had on my file was my American visa and some declaration from another American government entity that I'm clean and I don't need to. Now, the complication in my application is because my family name is Baghdadi. The head of ISIS is al-Baghdadi. So everybody thought that we are cousins. And I'm like, I am not even going to comment on that. The reason that I wanted Australia is because it's very far and remote from everything happening in the Middle East, because I had enough from all the turmoil, the troubles that's happening. And I wanted to focus on my passion, which is events management. And I wouldn't say that I want to stop helping people. I've been volunteering since I was 16 years. I didn't know that Rotary exists at that time. But then in 2004, I was a founding member in a Cosmopolitan Rotary Act. A Cosmopolitan Rotary Act is a definition in Rotary. A cosmopolitan club is a club that meets in an Arabic in a country and their meeting is held in a different language. So we are Arabic-speaking country, and our meetings were in English-speaking meetings. And then when I arrived to Australia, Rotary picked up. The second reason that I wanted to come to Australia, that Australia has one of the very few surviving religions that have been surviving for the past 40,000 years, and it's in another territory. So I figured out if that religion survived in this area and still there, then these people are nice. The reason that I chose Adelaide is the people are very different in Adelaide. I don't know, was it the water, is it the atmosphere, is it... But they're very nice. It's very hard to miss someone, even if you don't know, have an eye contact and they immediately a smile. In Sydney, they look at you like you just murdered someone. And Melbourne, they are always high. So people, whether green, it means that it's always green. It means that it's very healthy to live in. And it's very spread out, very different to any city that I lived in, high-rise building and all of that. So I loved it. Of course, since I arrived to Australia, because I'm a workaholic, I volunteered with most of these organizations that you know of. Salvation Army, I did around 560 hours and counting of voluntary work. Welcome to Australia and Australian Refugee Association. Please don't be fooled that I was with the cricket because I love the cricket. I have no idea what's cricket. In the interview for the cricket, they asked me, what do you know about cricket? I was like, oh my goodness. So cricket is played like baseball. This is my information. Created issues between New Zealand and Australia for the past 50 years because someone who I have no clue threw the ball somewhere on the ground, and it is an unethical thing to do, but it's very correct. And the Kiwis were fighting the kangaroos since that time. And Brett Lee, because I remember Bruce Lee and all of that. Now, the same exact orientation happened with the World Tennis Challenge because I was an events operation volunteer. They asked me, do you know anyone? I was like, I have no idea. And then Ivanovic stepped on the court while I was working, and he was like, hello. And I was like, hello. And they said, what did you talk to him? And I was like, he said hello. I said, hello, why? Who is that person? Why should I be very concerned? I voluntarily project manage a project with the Australian Red Cross, where we train new arrivals to Australia, immigrants who have work rights in Australia. What's the meaning of working in Australia? So we tell them about what to expect, how to read the contract, how to look for a job, why volunteering is very important in Australian culture, and superannuation and all of the fun, not really stuff. Save the Children, I'm on the board of fundraising and events committee that Save the Children Australia, mainly South Australia, we have. And also with the Red Cross, I'm on the board of the National Volunteers. So we map how the volunteers should be attracted, how to keep them, and all of that. Now, of course, Rotary is always a part of my life since I arrived. So I spoke at all of these clubs. Probably I covered more district than many people I know in Rotary. And counting. 18 and counting, of course, this is the beloved 19. And the reason that the whole thing started is Hyde Park. I know a couple of people at Rotary Hyde Park whom asked me to come and speak about my experience with refugees and asylum seekers and all of that, and my work as a logistics manager in Syria. And the wheel spun. The wheel of Rotary spun. And I spoke at all of these clubs, and I think those are the ones that I only spoke at. I remember that I spoke at more, but I can't pinpoint them. Now, after all of this 2 years, after doing all of this volunteer work, I can proudly say that I'm the man from the land down under. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Baz, I'm interested to see you had a song, A Stranger in Paradise. When I arrived in Australia, the two songs that stick in my mind still are the Beatles, All I Want Is Love, and Sadie, the Cleaning Lady. Anybody remember it? So those are early memories for me. But what a coincidence. We have two guys that arrived in Australia 46 years apart on the same week.
It comes with the age difference, remember?
Oh, that's all right. Just keep young. just think young. I think we're in a new stage in Australia where people are beginning to understand other cultures, and we now, as is Europe, relying on youth and intake from countries that are no longer in the European focus. What's your advice to the Australian government about assimilation of people, and particularly since you're focused on Syria and that part of the world, how do you think the government actually should work with these people to make sure that they enjoy their lives here and contribute to Australian society?
I love how optimistic you are that the government is actually going to listen to someone, but so you know how there are a lot of Syrian refugees are coming and be here in South Australia, 1,200 of them. So the Red Cross is one component that they are going to work, and then volunteering SANT, which is the biggest volunteering organization in South Australia and Northern Territory, asked me what my involvement would be and as working with refugees. And I told them I would personally like to be involved in one thing only, Australianism. Meaning I'm going to talk to these newcomers and tell them, remember you have fled something, this is something totally different over here. There's a lot of common boundaries, there's a lot of common grounds, but the things that are different, don't think about them as boundaries, think about them as adaptation. So you have to give some to get some. You will not stay in Australia and living with all your mentality that you flee from and you chose to leave, coming over here to apply whatever you have.
Okay, well, we have some questions here. Trevor?
Just a question from an immigrant's point of view. How do you think we could engage more immigrants to become involved in clubs like Rotary and contribute like you are?
I have to ask you to repeat the question. There was a lot of echo. I couldn't hear a thing.
Sorry, the question was, how do you think we could encourage more immigrants to become involved in Rotary as you have to contribute to the club?
It's going to be a little bit interesting simply because I'm going to tell you a very interesting experience I had in Syria actually. So when we had this turmoil in Syria, I said, let's call shelter box. They come in a box, pop it up, and all of that. It was a big no-no because anything foreign, they hated. So previously I said that I had 6 mobile hospitals in my warehouses that I have to deploy in Syria. I had to unpack them all, cross the American flag, cross made in USA, just so people would use them. Yet, I personally think that when people, they come to a Rotary function, they would understand what the hell, what do we do? Excuse me. What do we actually do? How are we helping people? And I think this is how we would attract more people to it, because they will understand what we are doing, and then they will understand that we are actually not brainwashing people. It's common ground of helping people.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Thanks, guys. That's been a fascinating insight. I'm just interested in Jordan, and I gather from your pitch that perhaps is it the Bedouin culture that has made it what it is in terms of its receptiveness to people from all those other countries, or is there some other factor?
There are many factors, geographical factors, where Jordan is in the middle of all the turmoil that's happening. Political factor, Jordan is one of the very few countries who have actual borders with Israel, that we have a treaty. Maybe other demographic factors, that Jordan started in 1946. 1948, Palestinians started coming to Jordan and living in Jordan. And then the Circassians, the Chechens, different religions came to Jordan. Jordan has one of the oldest churches, with the Mosaic Church in the Middle East. So the cohesive living, the concept of having a Christian neighbor or non-Muslim neighbor is very prominent. That's why probably Jordanians, we grew up, I personally am a Muslim, I went to a Christian church because my mom, with her infinite wisdom, said, we are going to know a lot about Islam, you have to know a lot about Christianity, because you will meet a lot of Christian people, you have to understand how to address them. So I think it's because it's been a mixing pot since the beginning. We have been understanding a lot.
John?
You didn't say very much about the culture in any way. We have, from time to time, lots of discussions about the quality of life of women in Australia. Would you contrast the quality of our women with the quality of your women and the difference in culture?
Since you brought it up, I was convinced that in Australia, anything revolves around three things: booze, barbecue, and women. Because everywhere I go, there's always these things that are creating issues and all of that. But then I figure out that the women are actually more of a decision makers in the don't tell me no. I am not married, I'm not partnered, but that's why I'm not. Because I know that if she said left, I will be, no, right, and then she'd be like, left. And I was like, don't tell me that's not true. Going back to you on a more serious note, yes, I have noticed that when it comes to women, let's say, because you have brought it up, and before the women over here, my beloved colleagues, I'm very well known in Jordan to be a gender activist. So when I'm saying something, don't think that, oh, he's sexist, oh, these freaking Arabs. I have noticed that the women, especially the immigrant women, when they come over here, they don't understand that it's a totally different culture, especially for the women. This is what they have to adapt. From where I come from, if you are talking about Islam, let's say, Islam was the very first religion to give the woman her full rights. If you are talking about Jordan, because we have been a very big mixing pot, we have different cultures wherever you go. But in general, for any Middle Eastern immigrants, female, if they come to Australia, probably they will not have much hard time in living because they are used to being the drivers of the house. They would be controlling everything in the house. So I think that's a very big similarity between Australians and Arabic, Middle Eastern women. I don't know if I have answered the question.
So it sounds very much the same.
Yes, definitely.
I think that's it. Well, thank you, Baz, for that insight. You do know that the club actually has a program running with migrant youth in Hindley Street and out of Croydon. You're probably involved in that already. Yes. I think the President and the President-elect were identifying diversity as one of the issues for the club, not only in terms of gender, but in terms of cultural diversity. I think you've demonstrated as the first step in this, and I'm sure you will become a great Rotarian. So thank you for your contribution, and here's a little gift from the club.
Thank you.